My name is Wes Siler, and I'm 25 years old.
And tell us your story. What are you doing today to change the world?
Well, one of the things that I've been working on recently is starting an organization called Conservatism 101, and the purpose of this organization is to begin a dialogue about modern American politics, and to basically include perspectives about the philosophies that politicians bring to the table, and to have open conversations about those within the university. A lot of times people think that politics is one of those things that should never be talked about. They typically say, stay away from religion and politics. But what I believe, and a lot of people that are working with me feel the same way, is that when you bring maturity and mutual respect to the conversation, you can have open dialogues about modern conservatism, modern liberalism, things like that. And so what I've begun to do is start classes at universities across the country about politics. And the way I'm doing it is I'm working with students, and they're basically going to their administrations and saying, hey, professors or deans or whoever it is, student council, people like that, we'd like to start a class on modern conservatism, for example, and we'd like to talk about what it is and basically figure out what we think about it, whether we agree or disagree. And that's kind of the whole point of what I'm doing, is to be able to kind of have those conversations. It's different than advocacy. A lot of people think that I'm trying to advocate the philosophy, and that's not really my goal. I don't think that I'm trying to change anybody's mind in that respect. I'm simply trying to have that conversation so that people understand what we're talking about. I'm kind of motivated to see people have a better grasp of politics in America and elsewhere as well, and to understand what they're talking about. That doesn't mean that they have to believe it, but when people say, well, I'm not conservative or I am conservative, I want them to know what they're actually saying and what that means and where that entire school of thought came from, rather than simply arguing or debating over things that they may or may not understand.
What inspired you to do that? Was there a moment, or was it kind of just a gradual thing?
Well, I had a lot of friends who were getting together. We started a reading group at the University of Virginia, and we were kind of reading books and things outside of the classroom and having great conversations about it. And at one point we realized, look, there's 25 of us sitting here talking about this after school, drinking coffee and stuff. Why not? I mean, this is essentially a class. We're having a great conversation. We're getting to know each other better. We're studying things that interest us, and we're beginning to respect the differences of opinion that each of us have. I mean, a lot of times people think that, oh, well, I'm a liberal or I'm a conservative, and it stops there, right? But people don't understand that even within liberalism, right, there's multiple different divergences that you can take. I can be a liberal who favors one type of policy. To me, maybe the pro-choice stance sticks out the most, or I can be a liberal in the sense that I favor more welfare redistribution. And the same is for conservatives as well. Sometimes conservatives, they call themselves libertarians. They say, I favor an extremely limited government and non-interventionist foreign policy. Or they can be more of a, Lincoln Republican who favors a bigger government but sees things in a national perspective and things that he in terms of civil rights and things. So within these different kind of philosophies, there are a lot of areas of difference in opinion, and that's what we had with my friends. Is they were like, well, look, a lot of us are conservative, but we're having these great discussions within that framework, and then we're also beginning to see areas of liberalism that we don't necessarily agree with. So we're kind of getting a nuanced opinion. We're having these great discussions. Why not transform this into a class? And that's exactly what we did. And then once we realized, hey, as students, we can start a class. Why not encourage other students to do the same thing? We didn't even know we had that power or that influence in our university, and that's how it spread. And as I've seen other students begin to realize, look, I spend a whole lot of time receiving from my university, but I can also give back, and I can help lead the direction of my college and begin to foster discussions and classes that are very much needed on my own. That's really inspiring. That's really cool, and that's what I like to do. That's where kind of all this.
What are some ways you've worked across traditional boundaries?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll be honest with you, Ben. Is that for a lot of people on my side of the aisle, and by that I mean conservatives, it's very divisive with the other side. And I guess you probably say that about both sides. But I spent a lot of time talking to conservatives, and they hate liberals, and they can't stand them, and it's like nothing that Obama does is right, and nothing that liberals say can ever be right. And to be honest, I'm not, I kind of spend a lot of time saying, well, hold on a second. Unless you think you're absolutely perfect and that everything you say is exactly right, you really can't approach the conversation that way. These guys are Americans too, and, they may disagree over what you're doing, or they may not see your point of view, but that doesn't mean you treat them like garbage. You treat them like the enemy, right? We're trying to work with these people. So I spend a lot of time with conservatives trying to help them get a better nuanced opinion about politics and realize that, look, liberals see the world differently than you do, but that doesn't make them terrible. And the best thing that can happen is for you to approach somebody who's a liberal and to begin a friendship with them and talk with them and understand where they're coming from. If you really want to understand what's going on in politics, and if you really want your agenda to succeed, then you got to be friendly to people who are willing to have a conversation with you. That's kind of my vision of politics is seeing people begin to actually sit down and say, for example, a lot of times people will get really, really deep into an issue, and they will talk about some minute aspect of healthcare that no one understands, or they'll talk about some foreign policy debacle 50 years ago and try to say, well, that completely refutes your belief system. And of course it does. Well, what people need to be talking about is, well, this is how I became a conservative, or this is how I became a liberal. This is where it came from what I can recall and what I think, and then to begin to share that experience with somebody else. And like I told you the other day, if you get somebody who's experienced an entirely different situation growing up, yeah, they may come to a different conclusion than you. But if you're not talking about none of those things, if you're just talking about some abstract policy concept that neither of you really know that much about, then you're never going to make any real progress in terms of actually being constructive.
No, I agree, definitely.
That's the kind of conversation we want to have in the classes, talking about the key aspects of where the stuff comes from, where the philosophy comes from.
Great. What are some of the challenges you see facing young people today?
I think one of the things that I've encountered a lot is I think that when people my age actually realize that they can start things on their own, and that they can develop their own initiatives and they can actually change the world, they get really inspired and they get very excited. But getting them to that point is difficult. For some reason, my generation typically is on the receiving end of a lot of things. And I guess that makes sense because we're all going to college. A lot of us are getting master's degrees. So you're spending 22, 23, sometimes 25 and 26 years in college before you even get out into the real world. And so you're in this mode of every day I'm receiving information from a class. Every day I'm writing a paper on command. And one of that's great, but one of the downsides of it is that you struggle to reconceptualize the system, or you struggle to be able to see things in a different way because you just assume it's always been like this. And so that's a big struggle that I have is I have so many students that are like, oh, wait, what? I can start a class? I've never even thought of that. Is that even possible? What, can we get in trouble? That's what I hear. Can we get in trouble? And I'm like, you are paying money to go to this institution. Of course you can start your own class. Of course you have a right to do that. You're paying money to go, and yet they're kind of so locked into these systems that they can't even contemplate the idea that they could actually change it for the better. And it extends beyond this initiative to our lives, is that we think, oh, there's always been conservatives and there's always been liberal politics, and that's just how it has to be. No, it hasn't. There have not always been those two groups. It's in American politics, and modern American politics specifically, that happened. There could be a point in time where that switches, and we call people by different names. And you look at other countries, and it is that way. You look at England, for example, and they have multiple different parties. It's not just Democrats and Republicans like it is here. There's all kinds of different parties. There's different ways of doing things, and some are better than others, and some aspects of other ways of doing things we can incorporate into our system. So getting people to think outside of the paradigm, outside of this environment we've been raised in, which, you know, I obviously love America and I love our system of government and everything, but beginning to see how can we lead that forward and make it even better, that's a challenge. That's a challenge. But once you do it, once you get students to think beyond that, once you get people to think beyond that, it's really exciting. And that's where things like Facebook, for example, comes from my generation. You know, guys from Harvard, you know, thought that up. They were like, wait, why not a social network? Things like that. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do here with this initiative, is show people, look, you can create something that was never there before. And for me, that's inspiring, but getting people to that place takes a lot of work.
Definitely. And what advice would you give to a young person who wants to get more involved in the political process? What would you tell them?
To get more involved with you guys?
Well, with the political process.
Oh, in the political process. Well, to begin to shift that entire perspective to what I was talking about, to begin to create leaders, you need people who are going to spend time thinking about how can things be better. How can I actually make a difference? Everybody wants to make a difference, but how many people actually take the time and really understand what's going on and then think about how they're going to make a difference? A lot of people spend about 5 minutes saying, well, I really want to help the poor, and then they go off running and doing it. You know, and they go to Africa overnight, and they give them, you know, they pass out food in Uganda or things like that. And, you know, that's great, but what happens when you come back? You know what I mean? Is that, you know, you've given food, great, and that helps somebody for a week, but now that's over with. Whereas if you had taken the time to sit down and think, you know, how could we really change things? How could we invest in the poor, not just give them something that actually change their lives for the better and develop something sustainable? Well, then that's a long-term process, right? Then it comes out to be something that you plan for a long time, and it's not going to fail as easily. So in terms of politics, like you just said, it can be the same way. If you really want to change politics for the better, then you need to understand where it's at, and then you need to figure out where it needs to go. And that takes a lot of time of really studying, really understanding what you think should be the values of people who are in public office, who are serving, and why it's not the way that you think it should be. So that would be the first thing that I would say, is getting people to step outside of the box, step outside of the world that you've grown up in, and begin to see things from a totally different perspective, and then bring that back in to the life that you've already been living.